Kairos Fateweaver is supposed to be the ultimate oracle of Tzeentch, a two-headed greater demon who sees every possible future, every branching timeline, every outcome that could happen. So why is a being that can literally see the past and the future constantly get outplayed, outmaneuvered, and embarrassed the second a named character enters the room? In this episode of Power Scaling Peeps, we're breaking down how powerful Kairos Fateweaver should be on paper, then diving into his most important fights across Warhammer 40K to see if he is actually just a misunderstood cosmic chess master playing a game we can't comprehend, or if he's just the biggest fraud I've ever seen in my Go life. Get ready to jump straight into the cow hole. Say it with me, fellas. It's time to power scale. Kairos Fateweaver is the personal visor of the Chaos God Tzeentch and one of the most powerful Lords of Change to ever exist. Long ago, when even Tzeentch himself could not unravel the ultimate mystery of reality, he sought answers at the Well of Eternity. This well sat at the very heart of the Impossible Fortress, a paradoxical nexus where all of time and space are said to originate, and eventually end. Unable, or perhaps unwilling, to risk himself, Tzeentch chucked his most trusted servant into the well to uncover its secrets. And so Kairos was cast, screaming into infinity and beyond, fully expected to be destroyed. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. I used to be known as the greatest Lord of Change, but then my purple nurple master decided to chuck me into this endless well. Hopefully it all ends well for me, and I come out with a ridiculous amount of power. How do we tell him? To Tzeentch's genuine surprise, Kairos survived, but survival came at a cost. When he emerged from the Well of Eternity, he was fundamentally changed. His immortal form was unnaturally aged and ragged, twisted by knowledge no single mind was ever meant to hold. Where once he had been one head, now there were two. His right head sees every possible future, every branching outcome, every what if that could ever unfold. His left head sees the entirety of the past, every truth, every lie, every hidden cause that led reality to its current state. Yet for all that godlike awareness, Kairos Fateweaver is cursed with one devastating flaw. He is completely blind to the present moment, which makes fighting and physical combat quite difficult for this big blue bird. However, don't let that fool you into thinking this is some massive nerf, because Kairos can literally view the entirety of the past and every possible future at once. On paper, that should be an absolutely insane combat buff. Beyond his curse, Kairos Fateweaver is still first and foremost a Lord of Change. Greater demons of Tzeentch who are widely regarded as the most powerful sorcerers in existence. And I'm not the one saying that, folks. Deathwatch, Mark of the Xenos, makes this abundantly clear, stating, Lords of Change are the greatest sorcerers in the galaxy and their mastery of magic is without peer. The mightiest psychic powers and spells employed by feeble human psykers and sorcerers are the idle cantrips of a Lord of Change. For a greater demon of Tzeentch is a creature of undiluted warp energy, and the mortal world quakes at its touch. With the merest flick of an elegantly tapered claw, bodies mutate and writhe, buildings twist and melt, and beings of madness and horror spring forth, cackling from running rivers of flesh. That is a in-universe declaration that even the strongest mortal psykers in the Imperium are effectively playing with party tricks compared to what a Lord of Change considers casual spellcasting. I would also like to remind everyone that the giant blue demon you see in Space Marine 2 is a regular Lord of Change. Yes, that was an unnamed throwaway Lord of Change that was still able to freeze an entire Ultramarine strike force, aside from our heroes, of course. I mean, come on, named Space Marines can't be affected by something as mundane as a time-stopping spell. Come on, guys, you should have known that already. This detail becomes even crazier when you remember that, according to the 4th edition Chaos Demons Codex, Kairos is said to be the first and mightiest among the Lords of Change. Using that statement alone, Kairos is upscaled tremendously. Other greater demons of Tzeentch, for example, Ateo Rao Caris, who heralds the end of sanity and life on any planet to which he is summoned, according to Imperial Armory Apocalypse 2, or Makakin, who fought Kaldor Drago extremely well before eventually being defeated, as seen in the 5th edition Grey Knights Codex. Both of these greater demons, and more like them, have demonstrated truly powerful feats, which may place them even at planetary scale. So as the strongest Lord of Change, he should be capable of doing the same exact thing, and potentially even more. This also means Kairos Fateweaver should at the minimum have access to virtually every major psychic discipline: biomancy, telekinesis, telepathy, teleportation, as well as matter, death, reality, and temporal manipulation. Kairos should be able to atomize enemies, hurl starships depending on their size, rewrite biology, warp space, distort time, and summon lesser demons of Tzeentch to shield and guard him.
That's a lot of damage!
To add to this already deadly magical arsenal in the 5th edition Chaos Demons Codex, he is stated to be able to manipulate poison, expelling a cloud of toxic gas that vaporizes those assailed, with virtually no defense against it, as well as projecting devastating energy blasts from his eyes to incinerate foes. And for those thinking, okay, sure, he's broken at magic, but he must be trash in physical combat. Well, not quite. Again, according to Deathwatch Mark of the Xenos, their appearance, however, is yet another ruse. Lords of Change are fearsome fighters, serpent quick with skin like iron. They are also lore masters and possess a thorough knowledge of the great feints and fighting techniques of the galaxy. To fence with a Lord of Change is to invite one's own ruin. Many overzealous warriors have been felled by their vicious claws, cruel curved beaks, and terrible reaving staffs, disemboweled before they can even lift their blades. So yes, folks, Kairos is powerful both in and out of melee according to these statements, which is absolutely insane. That means Kairos, who can see the past and every possible future at the same time, is also a legitimately dangerous close quarters combatant. On top of all of that, Kairos Fateweaver wields an extremely powerful weapon, the Staff of Tomorrow. Rather than just being a simple sorcerer's staff, it is a construct forged by Kairos himself and infused with the very essences of rival Lords of Change he has overcome. The weapon burns with change fire, drawn from the warp, and is saturated with prophetic visions taken from the Well of Eternity. Crowned atop it is the Tome of Destiny, a living, ever-rewriting book that records every prophecy uttered by Kairos' two heads. Simply looking upon its pages can drive mortals into madness, and being struck by it results in horrific and agonizing transmutations. Because Kairos is blind to the present, he even uses the tome as a temporal reference point, ensuring he knows where he is on the timeline. So Herd, let's be very clear before we even look at a single on-page feat. Based purely on statements, abilities, psychic dominance, war gear, and narrative role, Kairos Fateweaver should be at the absolute bare minimum high Primarch to planetary tier. Yes, I am being dead serious. If the 4th edition Chaos Demons Codex calls him the mightiest of the Lords of Change, then he scales above other Lords of Change who have been shown affecting entire planets or fighting the strongest Grey Knights, like Kaldor Drago. Combine that scaling with his insane psychic versatility, reality warping powers, temporal awareness, future sight, immortality, flight, and near limitless magical knowledge, and you are looking at an entity that should theoretically dominate almost any conventional battlefield. Sounds pretty broken, right? But now comes the fun part. Because statements are one thing, reality is another. Now that we've established how powerful Kairos Fateweaver should be, let's look at his many fights across Warhammer 40K to see if this purple nurple bird boy is actually the cosmic mastermind he's hyped up to be, or if Kairos Fateweaver is a fraud.
Come on over here. Come on over here. No, you flip me off. Come on, coward. No. Come on. You're not an intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.
Across Warhammer 40K, Kairos has multiple fights and statements we can look at to truly answer the question we're asking in today's installment of Power, Skill, and Pips. Here's the roster of battles we're going to examine. First, his fight against Guilliman in the book Rise of the Primarch. Second, his duel against Lionel Johnson in the novella The Lion. Third, his invasion of Craftworld Uthway in the 8th edition Craftworld's Codex. Fourth, his fight against a Dread Knight in the 5th edition Grey Knight's Codex. And finally, his altercation with an unnamed demon prince in the Index Chaotica. We're going to go through each of these fights from the top to the bottom, and whenever a fight shows Kairos underperforming, relying on outside help, or flat out losing in a way that shouldn't happen for the supposed greatest Lord of Change, I'm raising a fraud flag. By the end of the video, if 3 or more fraud flags are collected, this blue bird boy will officially be labeled a piece of doo-doo, a statement leech, and worst of all, a fraud. We're starting with Kairos' first major duel against Rabute Guilliman. Let me first set the stage for their encounter. This occurs in the book Gathering Storm, Rise of the Primarch, as Rabute Guilliman has just been resurrected and now intends to return to Terra. But Kairos Fateweaver has other plans. He has set in motion his schemes to manipulate, tempt, or destroy the returning Primarch. As Guilliman is en route to Terra, he is intercepted and trapped within the Maelstrom by Magnus the Red. Although he is aided by Eldrith Uthran, who navigates him out of the Maelstrom, he is eventually ambushed by Kairos and the Red Corsairs. The Lord of Change then uses his precognition to manipulate the battlefield, coordinate an assault with demons and Chaos Space Marines, to trap and weaken the Primarch and his followers before taking the field himself, attacking Guilliman's flagship, Macragge's Honor. Guilliman spies the Lord of Change and rushes to attack him. It did not take Kairos' matchless future sight to foresee that his enemy would attempt to reach and slay him. The Lord of Change was no match for Guilliman in battle, but armed with his faultless precognition, he had long prepared for this moment. So right off the bat, we see that Kairos is apparently no match for Guilliman. And keep in mind, this is Guilliman, the so-called low Primarch staple. The guy who has a habit of losing every single Primarch duel.
You suck!
The same Primarch who got bodied by Corfarion in Know No Fear, and almost died to Alpha Legion legionaries in Unremembered Empire.
What is going on with you? What are you talking about?
Even with all the reality warping, time bending, reality altering powers Kairos supposedly wields, he is still stated to be explicitly weaker than Guilliman in direct combat. Now, I will say Guilliman is armed with the Emperor's Sword, which is an anti-chaos weapon that is capable of permanently banishing demons and seems to be able to block magic attacks. However, Guilliman isn't, at least not yet, a fully awakened Psyker, and thus can't wield the full potential of the Emperor's weapon. What happens next shows how Kairos compensates. Using a ritual performed with 9 Heralds of Tzeentch and the Staff of Tomorrow, he exploits mental traps he has been subtly planting in Guilliman's mind throughout the Maelstrom. The ritual amplifies Guilliman's guilt, fear, and anger, binding him in psychic chains that immobilize him despite ferocious resistance. All attempts by the Ultramarines, Saint Celestine, and Inquisitor Greyfax to intervene fail, as Kairos' spell shields his minions and renders bolt fire and other attacks ineffective. Guilliman does rise briefly, hammering Kairos with rounds that tear bloody chunks from his flesh, but ultimately, he is forced to his knees. Kairos asserts control and commands the Ultramarines and their allies to stand down, effectively winning the battle without ever needing to overpower the Primarch physically. So Kairos does indeed capture Guilliman, but I am not kidding, guys. Immediately afterwards, despite, being able to see the future, Kairos fails to see a massive horde of Khorne warriors arriving to do battle.
Are we blind?
The text does try to explain this away, but I'm not buying it. Perhaps it was a mysterious influence of the fortress itself. Perhaps Guilliman's anomalous presence within the strands of fate distorted them in ways that even the Fateweaver could not perceive. Whatever the case, as he made preparations to leave the Blackstone Fortress, the demon did not foresee the vast horde descending upon him. Essentially, Kairos had one job and he absolutely fails. This failure directly results in Guilliman being freed and escaping. And to add insult to injury, multiple passages highlight that he is just simply weaker than Guilliman, despite his theoretical advantages. First, during his ritual that if he failed, Guilliman would surely banish him back to the warp. And even worse, as Guilliman is escaping, far away across the chamber, Guilliman caught sight of Kairos Fateweaver, extorting his followers into battle and hurling bolts of sorcery at the loyalists from afar. Yet the Lord of Change clearly did not choose to face Guilliman's resurgent wrath, for he stayed far removed from the heat of battle. This fight should be relatively easy for a being like Kairos, who can theoretically use every single psychic discipline and spell, as well as having the ability of future sight. Hell, we see later in this book Magnus the Red bully Guilliman on Luna before the Sisters of Silence intervene. So, do we give Kairos a fraud flag? Well, this really comes down to how powerful we consider Guilliman after receiving the Emperor's Sword. In the modern setting of Warhammer 40K, he has fought several demon Primarchs, such as Fulgrim, Mortarion, and Magnus, as well as 2 traitor Primarchs during the Horus Heresy, Angron and Lorgar. And well, he has lost to about every single one of them, although he did draw with Lorgar and Betrayer before Angron arrived. This may sound like Guilliman himself is a fraud, but I would say otherwise. He is still weaker by Primarch standards compared to, say, the Lion, Leman Russ, or Vulcan, but a Primarch nonetheless. Guilliman has still defeated beings like Skarbrand, Quagmar, and Septus, all of which are powerful demons. So I would say it's not insane that Guilliman could defeat Kairos in battle, especially with the Emperor's Sword. So what does this autistic ramble mean for the Blue Bird? To summarize, I will say it's not out of the ordinary for Guilliman to win this fight against Kairos Fateweaver. But, yes people, but the reason I will be raising the fraud flag is that Kairos' power should be more similar to Magnus the Red as one of the strongest sorcerers in the galaxy. So yes, this first duel between Guilliman and Kairos Fateweaver definitely deserves a fraud flag. Kairos is one of the strongest Lords of Change and is stated to be able to fence and use every psychic discipline, let alone see the future. But apparently is nowhere near Guilliman's level, and the text makes it abundantly clear that he would get low diffed if they actually fought. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we think about the abilities Kairos should have. So this is one fraud flag for the Big Blue Bird. On to the second duel. The next duel is against another Primarch, this time one of the stronger ones, Lionel Johnson, who is unquestionably a top 5 Primarch in most series rankings. This confrontation takes place in the novella The Lion during the Thramas Crusade. The Invincible Reason is ambushed and thrust in the warp without being able to properly raise its Geller fields after a battle with the Night Lords. Warp interference prevents void shields from functioning and pockets of raw warp space begin forming within the ship itself. In other words, this is as close to home field advantage as Kairos Fateweaver is ever going to get outside of the Eye of Terror. And he even says so much himself. That might work in the real universe, but not here. You're in my realm now, or at least teetering upon the brink of it. You can't ignore me this time. If Kairos is partially within the warp, with a greater metaphysical alignment to his own dimension, he should theoretically be stronger here than in a standard material engagement. Kairos first emerges before Corswain and several other Dark Angels, lashing out with the tip of his staff. He summons lightning that rips apart legionaries, and bolter fire explodes harmlessly against his ever-shifting hide. Then the Lion arrives. Unlike with Guilliman, Kairos actually duels the Son of Caliban. When the Lion charges, the Lord of Change reacts with astounding speed. Before its gaze was on Corswain again, the Lion launched himself at the Niflheim, sword outstretched. With astounding speed, it reacted, twisting its whole body in his direction, staff coming up to spew forth a sheet of forking energy. Kill it core, snarled the Lion as reefs of crackling energy enveloped him, sending pain coursing through every limb, surging into his chest and pounding his head. So as you can see here, the Fateweaver reacted to the Lion, and managed to Palpatine his ass with warp lightning. Unfortunately though for our big bird boy here, the Primarch immediately breaks free.
Sensational.
And then once again attacks Kairos. Kairos deflects the lion's first strike, but then he loses. The lion drops one blade, seizes the demon's neck mid-fall, drags it down, and impales it upon despair. The lion even finishes with an epic insulting line to the Precognition King. Did you see this coming? The lion even uses some weird warp power to banish Kairos that we never see used again. Classic Games Workshop, am I right? Now this is plain and simple brutal, but does it deserve a fraud flag? Let's evaluate this fight a little bit deeper. First, Kairos reacts and manages to respond to the lion, which is impressive as hell, as the lion is shown to be one of the fastest Primarchs, and in the book Savage Weapons was able to blitz Conrad Kurz, a Primarch with precognition. This shows that Kairos' precognition is probably superior to Conrad Kurz, and that he has the capabilities to keep up with the lion in combat, albeit very briefly. The lion is known as a duelist among the Primarchs, and according to Horus Heresy Book 9 Crusade, among his brother Primarchs, the lion was renowned for his prowess in combat. So I will say losing to the lion is not exactly bad, especially since Kairos actually put up a fight, although it was low diff for the lion. So it is a poor result for Kairos, but I am not going to raise the fraud flag for this fight. Kairos scales anywhere from High Primarch to Planetary if you really want to upscale its feats, but realistically it makes sense he lost here, since the lion is so gosh darn powerful. Kairos at least put up a fight this time, and so his flag count will remain at only 1. Let's move on to the third fight, his invasion of a craft world. Will the Eldari inverse plot armor help Kairos out this time? Let's find out. This one is against the Craft World Uthway from the 8th edition Craft World Codex and is relatively short. I am not kidding, this is the entire passage. Demon forces invade the defenseless Uthway, breaching the Craft World surface to alight within the dome of crystal portents. There they are met in battle by the exiled Farseer Eldrith Uthran and his faithful followers, along with the warriors of the Yunari and Harlequins. Despite the presence of Kairos Fateweaver and a sextant coven of Keepers of Secrets, the Eldar swiftly banished their foes. That's it. So let's break this down properly. Ulthoy is first described as defenseless, reinforced elsewhere in the Codex by the statement that the majority of its armies and defenders were not present on the craft world at that time. Into that situation walks Kairos Fateweaver and a sextant, meaning 6 Keepers of Secrets, plus additional demonic forces. Now, to be fair to Eldred and his Eldar allies, they could win this. Eldred himself is one of the most powerful psychers in 40k. He has projected psychic beacons akin to the Astronomicon, slaying Keepers of Secrets within their own demon worlds in the Eye of Terror, and according to Death Mask, Eldred has supreme mastery over the psychic arts. Like all his Farseer kin, he can read the future by casting Wraithbone runes, communicate telepathically across huge distances, and enter visionary trances that allow him to observe the galaxy without moving a muscle. In battle, he can melt minds of those who cross him, summon Eldritch blasts, and even hurl aside war machines with a pulse of thought. So I will not say it's impossible for Eldred to pull this off, but we also need to understand what he's up against. Even an unnamed Keeper of Secrets is not fonder, as stated in Deathwatch Mark of the Xenos. In combat, the Keepers of Secrets display speed and guile that few can defeat, made all the harder to combat by the beguiling aura that assails their foes. They are impossibly fast, their form shifting and blurring as they dart in and out. In addition to their speed, the Keepers of Secrets bring prestigious sorcerer's powers to bear on their enemies, blasting them with the raw energy of the warp or reducing them to gibbering fools. So there are 6 of those, plus Kairos Fateweaver, arguably the greatest demon sorcerer in Tzeentch's arsenal, on a supposedly defenseless craft world. So, does that warrant a fraud flag? Well, if I'm being truthful here, the problem is not that it actually happens, it's more that the Codex emphasizes that it was done swiftly.
Wanna see me run to that mountain and back? You wanna see me do it again?
Since this is all we get from the Codex, we are forced to interpret that Kairos was easily defeated along with 6 greater demons of Slaanesh and an unknown number of additional demonic forces. With his statements and supposed power, he should at least rival Eltrid in magical combat. We should have seen something like Kairos and Eltrid duel for hours, or their psychic powers made the craft world tremble. Instead, we get a single sentence saying he and his army were swiftly banished. Wow. At least this is an Eltrid upscale, right guys? Right? Poor Kairos, treated like fodder yet again. This is most definitely a fraud flag, raising our count to 2. With only 2 fights left to go, will Kairos be labeled a fraud or not? Make your bets, people! Make your bets. Because we're moving to his 4th fight against a Dread Knight. The next duel takes place during the purging of Yolana as recounted in the 5th edition Grey Knight's Codex. The world of Yolana has been overrun by demonic forces after Ahriman weakened the barriers between the Materium and Immaterium. Amidst the chaos, the Grey Knights under Brother Captain Kadon Varn intervene to protect the Imperial Defenders. It is here in the Great Hall of Yolana that Kairos Fateweaver emerges, confronting Varn as he attempts to seal a warp rift. Kairos the Fateweaver, manipulator of eternities. A greater demon so mighty that even a brother captain of the Grey Knights should be wary of battling it at anything less than the height of his powers. Wow, so right off the bat, we're getting some blazing from the Grey Knights. Maybe things will be different with this duel, folks. The two begin to clash, and Kairos warps Varn in a rolling cloud of warp energy. Even with Varn channeling his psychic powers to reinforce his armor, the cloud still melts his armor and scorches his flesh. Varn even notes, Karn knew this creature was beyond him, for he was weakened by his previous efforts in battle. Desperate, Varn triggers a teleport Homer and summons a motherfucking nemesis Dread Knight, which appears between Kairos and the injured Grey Knight. What happens next is absolutely brutal. Before Kairos could react, the Dread Knight's greatsword struck the greater demon's staff, the force of the blow smashing it into fragments. The Lord of Change screeched for aid, and a score of demons rushed to his defense. Kairos took wing, but the Dread Knight's reactions were too fast, catching the Lord of Change's trailing ankle in a vice-like grip. Servo motor straining, the Dread Knight whirled around, using the momentum to slam the demon into the ground with stunning force. Before Kairos could recover, the Dread Knight brought its greatsword down in a glittering arc and decapitated the fallen demon. What did I just read? Not only does a creature who can supposedly see the future get blitzed by a Dread Knight, but Kairos actually gets no diffed in this fight.
Oh, no.
Which starts as Kairos being stated to be worthy foe of a Grey Knight captain, ends with him getting smashed like Loki by the Hulk. Of course, this receives a fraud flag. Kairos is a being who can see all futures. He should have foreseen the Dread Knight's teleport and attack, dodged it, summoned psychic countermeasures, or at the very least, put up a fight with his demonic minions. Instead, he gets blitzed, calls for help, tries to flee, and then gets hurled around and decapitated. Wow, he's actually a bum, not even a competent one. So with this fraud flag being waved, it brings our score to 3, which means the verdict is already decided. Kairos Fateweaver is 100% a fraud.
This sucks, man.
But of course, we have one more fight to look at, and it's against an unnamed demon prince. And oh boy, oh my, you guys probably know where this one is going. This one's unique because, like the Eldar example, it's basically a footnote in the lore, but the results are kind of insane, and it's regarding Kairos' unique weapon, the Staff of Tomorrow. According to Index Chaotica, Kairos' staff was stolen by an unnamed random demon prince who had left it in the Garden of Nurgle, resulting in Kairos having to brave the garden to retrieve it. For those doubting me, look at this. It literally says a rebellious demon prince plucked it from Kairos' grasp. Whether that was by theft or an actual fight is unclear, but the result is insane. Kairos lost his staff to an unnamed demon prince off screen. Why is this absurd, you ask? Well, greater demons are actual fragments of the Chaos Gods, while demon princes are mere mortals ascended. Sure, it does depend on which stands higher in the god's favor at that given moment, but I would expect a greater demon to always be stronger, because they are the literal fragments of the Chaos Gods, and remember what we discussed earlier, Kairos is said to be one of the mightiest Lords of Change, and Tzeentch's favored greater demon. So, this makes no sense. How does a lesser, unknown demon prince manage to steal Kairos' staff? So, do I even need to say it? This is another fraud flag for the big blue bird, which leaves us with a total score of 4 fraud flags. Meaning, as I just said, Kairos Fateweaver, the Oracle of Tzeentch, is a big fat fraud. Did you all see that coming? I bet Kairos Fateweaver didn't.
You can't keep getting away with this!
Before we end this video, I found a couple more statements and excerpts during my research that also paint Kairos Fateweaver as an absolute fraud. First, from the short book Aurelian, where Kairos appears to judge Lorgar as he continues his journey into the Eye of Terror. Leave me be, lest I destroy you as I destroy the Unbound. Both whiz heads bobbed in acknowledgement. If you could banish the Unbound, the first said, you could easily banish me as well. Or perhaps I am more than I appear to be, the second hissed. Perhaps you are weaker now, and you will fall before my sorcery. So Kairos openly admits, even while operating in the Eye of Terror, that he might be easily defeated by Lorgar, or that perhaps he could defeat Lorgar with his sorcery. Since there are multiple ways of interpreting this, I didn't include it on the official fraud list, but still not exactly a great look for the Blue Bird Boy. Then we also get this from the 5th edition Space Marine Codex. White consuls report banishment of Greater Demon, tentatively identified as the Fateweaver. So apparently the White consuls also banished Kairos as well. There's not much else to say besides the fact that Mr. Big Bird here just can't seem to stop taking L's. And that, my friends, will do it for this episode of Fraud Watch. If you guys enjoyed this one, drop in the comments who you want to see next. I've been considering doing the Demon Primarchs, or some other big names in the setting like the Emperor or Horus, so let me know down in the comments who you want to see next. A huge shout out to my Patreon and YouTube members for keeping the channel running and supporting the content we have here. Dinkleberry, Caleb White, Omar, Lag, Musty Lawyer, Seth Capizilla, and Keydri. You guys are my favorite cows in the world, and I couldn't do this without you. As opposed to getting out a ridiculous amount of content this month, I'm probably only gonna get out at least 4 to 5 videos, as opposed to 6 or 7, because I will be in Japan, as I mentioned in my last video. I hope you guys all understand, but I will be making up for it in the next month, because we're doing a War in Heaven themed month. So that means we're only doing videos centered around that period of time, which means we're going to be scaling the Catan, the Eldar gods, and much, much more. So make sure you stick around for that one, fellas. As always, stay milked, and I'll see you all in the next video.